Hey, welcome back to the channel. In this video, I kind of want to talk about something a little bit different than usual. Normally, I'm analyzing new players through the portal or new recruits or breaking down a conference with power rankings or a game. In this case, I want to talk about something a little more personal, and that's the fan experience at Clemson football games. So I hope that this is cathartic for you. I hope this is something where you could say, yeah, like I'm glad someone's saying this out loud and posting it, and hopefully the powers that be see it. I hope that's your reaction. If not, I'm sorry. This comes from a good spot as I love Clemson football. But quite frankly, it hasn't been as fun basically starting in 2020. I want to give you a little background as to why I say that and why I love Clemson so much. I attended my first game when I was in high school in 2006. It was Clemson, Georgia Tech. It was college game day. And I specifically remember it was, the way my memory works, I remember stories and vignettes. And one of the vignettes, the plays I remember is CJ Spiller juking two Georgia Tech defenders, basically making them just break their ankles and fall on the ground. And then he runs it like half the field, like 50 yards for a touchdown. It was incredible. It was my first college football game at all, let alone at Clemson. I don't remember if it was immediately after that, but they started playing Zombie Nation's Kerncraft 400. I was jumping up and down. My age perception when I was 19 was I'm sure skewed, but I think like a 70-year-old woman was next to me and she was jumping up and down, doing the whole thing with Zombie Nation. I was like, this place is amazing. That was my first Clemson experience. Then as a student, Clemson beats Florida State on Labor Day. We rushed the field. We had to come back off the field. I didn't rush the first time. We rushed again. It was incredible. We lose the end of that year to Matt Ryan. It was incredibly heartbreaking. The whole town is like sad. Maybe it was just my perception, but the way that the whole town and the vibe was like set by football, which I don't know if that's healthy, but it was so cool. And there's so many more moments like that. I think actually some of the best ones were before the Clemson championships. The 2013 win over Aaron Murray's Georgia Bulldogs was special for me because I grew up in Metro Atlanta, and I always just thought like Georgia is just, a level above, will never be as good as them. That was just growing up in Atlanta, how it felt. And then when we beat them, it was surreal. I actually bought season tickets, even though I lived all the way in Winston-Salem, just to get that game. A buddy who lived in LA split them with me. That's how bad we wanted to go to that game. And it was well worth it. I mean, that was awesome. And then I think about the Hurricane game, beating Notre Dame. I think about the Louisville game. That was probably the best Clemson event or just sporting event I've ever attended. I don't know if it'll ever be topped. Louisville, Lamar Jackson at Clemson, Deshaun Watson. It's a back and forth game. Louisville pulls away. Clemson, I think it was like scores, gets a stop, scores, gets a stop, scores, and then they have to get a stop, but you can't stop Lamar Jackson until the very end. There's a false start. The crowd is so good. The Marcus Edmond pushes James Quick out. Clemson wins. I was like choked up at just how much heart and how much belief that team had. I knew they had won the national championship in that moment. That's why I say that's the best moment I've ever experienced in sports, was right there. I mean, obviously the national championships, Clemson's Elite Eight in basketball are close, but I think that's number one. So I've had a lot of fun, probably unhealthy in ways of how much it's affected my mood. I think the championships have freed me of that. But that started to change in 2020. I felt like 2020, not Clemson's fault at all. Team was a little worse, but they were still very good. But no crowds. It was all about COVID and politics. It wasn't as fun that year. It was what it was. In 2021, I was really excited for football to kind of like be normal again and be fun again. And I was in Charlotte when Clemson didn't score a touchdown against Georgia. They started 4-3, and so the rest of the season was kind of a wash because there's, the best case scenario is what we got, which was a Cheez-It Bowl. So that wasn't so fun. And then the following years, they weren't bad. But I think that's where I kind of want to start breaking down where things have gone wrong, is that given what Clemson invests in this program, I do think it's actually fair to expect a little bit more. So what are fair expectations for Clemson football? Well, Clemson is giving the vast majority of the revenue share dollars. That is the money that the school is actually allowed to allocate. They're giving that to football. Only about 11% goes to men's basketball, and the rest is basically a rounding error to baseball or anything else they want to invest in, like women's basketball. So football is taking so much, it's becoming a competitive disadvantage for basketball, as when you compete against like a North Carolina or UConn or a Louisville. The football is taking so much, it makes it challenging. So I think it's fair that given the support over the support, the championships, the facilities, just like the last 50 years, Clemson might not be like Ohio State or Alabama, but they're closer to that than they are Duke or SMU or Georgia Tech, all teams that beat them last year. So I do think that there is somewhere in the middle where, sure, you can't expect a national championship every year. You probably can't even expect to be in the championship game or even the Final Four every year. But you can't expect to like be a playoff contender every year at Clemson. I think that is a very real, like legitimate, fair expectation for Clemson football, is that, in November, you're competing for the 12-team playoff. Contrast this to basketball. Basketball is behind the eight ball from the start. North Carolina, Louisville, Virginia, Duke, all of them are going to have more revenue share dollars, more NIL dollars, more kind of like history of being a blue blood, maybe even prestige, you might say, than Clemson. And yet, despite that, Clemson, they may not win the ACC, but they're punching above their weight class. They beat Louisville last year. They beat UNC last year. They beat two other teams that made the tournament. I'm not counting SMU, who made the round of 68, but not the round of 64. So they beat three teams if you count them, on top of Louisville, North Carolina. So I think what makes basketball so much more fun in one regard is that, it's hard to win. They have disadvantages. You're like sort of the Brewers, and that you're competitively disadvantaged against like the Dodgers, but they're doing every single thing they can to win. And so the wins you do get, you really appreciate. And that's where I think basketball is so different. Basketball is not going to go out and get Mikal Brown, like this great superstar freshman, but they're going to develop Ace Buckner in a redshirt year, and then he's going to be great in the second half of the year, his redshirt freshman season. And that's really rewarding. Kind of, they're not going to get Testa Ritter from a European Pro League, but they're going to bring back RJ Godfrey because he loved the Clemson experience and missed it and wanted to be back. And he's going to be comparable, and he's going to outplay a European star in Henry VSR from UNC as the Clemson beats UNC. And that's kind of what makes them so lovable, I think. Now, someone who I talk a lot of Clemson sports with, we were talking about what is it about Clemson football that's been so frustrating? Is it just the losses? And he said, no, I don't care necessarily about the losing, which he does, I'm sure, but I think his point is spot on here. It's that he said, I quote, I just feel like we're not using every resource we can to build the best team and the best coaching staff. If we do that, I'll live with whatever the results come. It just hasn't felt like that's been the mission the last 5 years. And that hits it on the nose for me, because it just feels like, you're frustrated that they are hiring, they were hiring, just former players, not the best hires for coaches. Then they would refuse to use the portal. Then they dipped their toe in the portal, but it was 2 years ago. Very obviously, they needed to add defensive end. They said, no, we believe in our guys. They don't do it. Then they have a huge hole at defensive end that every fan, could see this from a mile away. This is very obvious. And so it's like they're not trying. And I think that is what makes it so frustrating. Now, that seems to have been changed, particularly on defense this year, as Tom Allen has went out and fixed the defense largely through the portal. So now we're seeing that change. But I think that's what made it so frustrating. And I'm going to talk about solutions in a second, but the other part of this is fan experience. So a couple of years ago, I was paying $300 parking in Brooks Lot, and just walking to the game. It was great. Always parking with my friend. We'd have a great tailgate under the trees in the shade. Well, then all the winning happened, which I'm thankful for, but that caused us to move further away, down the road. Then it was further away to New Spring. We had to take a shuttle. Then we lost that. We moved to Seneca Creek, and then we lost that. We moved over to Calhoun. I think it was like Calhoun Corners, in sort of those student apartments. And that's not always at $300. Eventually I had to raise it, but still my parking went down. And that's not so much a complaint. It's just the reality. They also added metal detectors for security, which again, probably necessary. I'm not really complaining about it, but now I'm walking 25 minutes. I'm waiting 20 minutes in line to get through the security. That's a lot different than it was back in 2013 and 14 when Clemson was on the rise. So you can't really go back to that level of success that we had in 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014, and even 2015. I remember still being in Brooks Lot for that Hurricane game. You can't go back to that kind of that success level, but now give me sort of the encumbered bad parking, longer wait to get in, right? So we've kind of like that trade. That's not a trade anymore. Now I'm just left with the remnants of what success cost. Last year I went up to the LSU game and the atmosphere was awesome. They had a drone show. It was amazing. The hill with the fireworks was great. The crowd was outstanding, but I got home at 1 a.m. I'm dragging myself to church the next day, half awake. Not ideal. The next week we turn around, we go right back for Troy, drive a 2-year-old up there, 2.5 hours, park, walk 25 minutes, wait for the, security to get in. Did have a great tailgate. I will shout that out. And that still makes it worth it as the community, but get in there, watch 5 minutes of football. We got an over hour-long rain delay. Can't expect a 2-year-old to sit through that. So we turn around and drive home after 5 minutes of football. And that's what I'm starting to think, like, is this worth it? Is this still worth it? And I would love for you guys to comment, like, is this resonating with you? Is this your experience that things have gotten worse, but Clemson was winning? So it was like great trade. But now that Clemson's not winning, can we go back to how it used to be before all that winning? If we're not going to get the winning, can we have kind of the fun, non-corporate world we used to have? So that's where I turn to solutions. And this first one is just to say you can't undo what they did. Totally. I think the worst thing that they did during the glory days when all the money was pouring in is they poured the money into construction. They built more practice fields. I remember they put soccer practice fields on like a critical parking lot that my friend was in, so we couldn't tailgate there anymore. Then they built the softball field and put that over another critical parking lot. So that shifted people again, and that shifted us to worse spots again. That memorial across the street from the hill is beautiful. I love it. I'm not criticizing it, but that's another example of them kind of burning good parking. Most recently, they literally built a facility management building on more parking, Seneca Creek Meadows, and that displaced us for like the 4th time. I guess you can't undo all of that. At least I can't imagine they will, but they gotta be more serious about the fan experience. Like, I'm not against softball, but you have to understand football is what's paying all the bills. You can't make it a worse experience for the football fans for these secondary things, soccer, softball, all these other things. I think that has to stop immediately, and you have to get really serious about finding good places to park, not shuttles. They're doing a deck, which I think is great. It's not really the most ideal, right? People don't really want to tailgate in a deck, and it's going to be hard to get in it, particularly out after a game, but at least it's adding inventory, which helps a big problem, which is just the cost of parking. And associated with the cost is the difficulty selling parking. The tickets have moved online, which is fine. I did love the paper pretty tickets they used to have. That was cool. So I kind of miss those. But for parking, they've kept it paper only. You have very limited time to sell a physical parking pass on UPS. And frankly, it's just not worth it when a lot of these parking passes you're going to sell for $15, $20. And I'm just like, is this, again, I'm asking myself, is this really worth it? Like, what are we doing here? Selling parking passes online, paper, and then shipping them. So one thing they could do to increase inventory is just make it easy to sell them so people don't just burn them. And when I say that, I mean, just eat the sunk cost and just say, it's not worth it. I'm just not going to sell this pass for $50, which pushes all the prices up another few bucks. Enough people do that. And now it's hard and they're scarce, and you've got lots that aren't full, that are the good lots, and you're parking really far away. I think moving them digitally is a must do immediately. The other thing they did, and this kind of relates, not solely, but part of it is when they got rid of the balloons on the hill. That was such a special part of the tradition and the experience of the hill. And at night games, they fixed it because they added the fireworks. And I would say that's almost as good. So you have the fireworks, you have the drone show, the night game atmosphere. It really is very good. But if it's a noon or like a 3:30 game against Troy or Wake Forest, losing the balloons is actually like a pretty devastating blow. It's hot. You're going to stand in the September sun. You're going to listen to bad music, like Who You Wit. And you're going to see, like, are we excited for professor of the game, recycler, green of the game, student of the game? I don't know what you do, but you've got to do something to spruce up those like mid-level day games. They've huge night games against LSU. Awesome. The experience is memorable. Clemson just doesn't win those anymore. So if I'm going to a 3:30 game against UNC this year, you've got to make it a better experience. I mean, if you're parking 25 minutes away, you're waiting 25 minutes, 20 minutes to get in. It's hot. You got to add something besides recycler of the game. I will say, to their credit, like the Military Appreciation Day, I like that they do it against a, usually like an FCS team. Just the halftime show is worth it. When they brought in, I'm blanking on his name now, Lee Greenwood. When they brought in Lee Greenwood for that Virginia Tech Military Appreciation Day years ago, that was incredible. Unbelievable experience. Do stuff like that. I love the healthcare hero of the game. I get choked up. Love the military hero of the game. It's amazing. Good patriotic touch. You got to do more stuff like that. Less stuff like who you wit and student of the game. That stuff just doesn't hit home. So look, this is going a little long, and I'm going to wrap it up here on this note. I don't want this to come off as just a complaint. It's not. It's a plea for the Clemson that we've loved for so many years. And as the winning, which has been awesome, and I'm thankful for it, and it's created unbelievable memories and trips going up to Syracuse and seeing Niagara Falls, going out to Napa Valley to see a championship. So many things like that, just incredible. I'm so thankful for. So if Clemson can achieve that again, fine. If not, we got to find a way to bring back sort of the family sort of atmosphere. And so maybe I'll end with what is fair in terms of expectations. Clemson, if we're being honest, we don't have the prestige of a Notre Dame or a Michigan. We don't have the money of a Texas Tech or Texas A&M. We don't have sort of either of that of like an Ohio State or an Alabama. We don't have the location for recruiting that Miami or Georgia has. So like to be in the Final Four, and that's not even mentioning, Texas, Oklahoma, plenty of other schools that it's just hard to compete against. So maybe Clemson shouldn't expect to be in the Final Four every year anymore. I thought that run was amazing and couldn't last forever, but maybe Final Eight, or maybe just most years you're in the playoff with a puncher's chance to advance. And maybe everything comes together and you can win a national championship again. Or maybe it's kind of more like college basketball, maybe not like Clemson with college basketball, but maybe more like North Carolina with college basketball, and that you expect to make it most years and to make a run a lot of years. And maybe that's what it is for Clemson football on the football side. If you're going to put the resources, you have the history, you have the sort of prestige of that level. Again, maybe that's an imperfect comparison because UNC is like the best program in college basketball, maybe aside from like UConn. But that's the idea, is I think Clemson should expect to be a consistent playoff contender. And if they are, a lot of this kind of fades away. But if they're not, and frankly, either way, they've got to find a way to harken back to what this was 10 years ago before it became more corporate. Let me know what you think. I hope I don't sound just spoiled, but I think this is the sentiment from a lot of Clemson fans, is that Clemson football needs to give us the feeling that they're doing everything they can to win. And if they're just pushing every button they can, and Alabama's got more history, Miami's got the better location for recruits, and Texas Tech has more money, then fine, so be it. We go 9-3, and I can live with that, knowing Clemson's a family place with all these memories. They're doing everything they can. We love it, and it's a great experience. But as those have waned, you can't wane on the winning. Let me know what you think. I want to hear your thoughts in the comments. As always, thanks for watching. Thank you to our sponsor, Ready Vets. If you live in the upstate and have a dog or cat that needs immediate care, Ready Vets is the place to go. If you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe.